Ultimately, it's, yes, doing the OT levels, and that has to do with the body thetans and finding them.
But it should be mentioned that the instrument itself simply measures the electronic connection that's going through your body to the other can you're holding. It's measuring galvanic skin response. So the moister your hands are, the tighter you're gripping it, the better the connection is going to be, and the farther over the meter is going to be.
Well, they say that's not true, so, you know.
Well, that's what the science would say.
Right.
The real science.
The real science? Yeah, that's a new one for me, the real science. Yes.
Electrical engineer, and I...
Oh, good.
And all it is a conductance meter. It measures the... basically how much current can go through your body, and it's largely dependent on how wet your hands are and how you grab the cans on it. That's all it measures.
It can't be that, because they don't let you have dry hands and they don't let you squeeze them really tight. They have a whole thing on that. So it's like it is the measuring of the resistance.
That's all it does.
That's all it does. Yeah. Yes. Okay, yes, yeah.
I was curious, I didn't quite get the part when they told you to make bogus names and bogus addresses, I guess for email or website.
I was opening up phony accounts.
For what purpose, though?
What they were doing, they were like...
spamming the news group.
They were spamming ARS, which was a news group with ex-Scientologists on it, talking about all these top secret things they didn't want known. Right? So they were trying to go on there anonymously, right? Not as anybody they are. They didn't want to be traced. This was before Anonymous. They didn't want to be traced to the Church of Scientology. So I had to use phone cards, a money order, phony name, phony address, phony phone number. So there was no way you could trace it to the Church of Scientology.
And what would you say on these?
I didn't do it. See, I didn't use them. All I did was call up my friend Bill Yachty and say, here's the email address, here's the password. And then he would do all this stuff on the internet. See? But and they're still doing it to this day. I mean, now they have all the anti-psych stuff they come on and do, or anti-Tory stuff. They'll have tons of shit about that, or, you know, it just depends, whatever their thing is this day. But while I was working with them, originally they flew me around. And then they realized, wait a minute, we can just do it from the phone. You know, we'll get a phone book. So they brought in all these phone books from like Seattle or whatever, and we'd look up somebody's name. Now, you can't do identity theft because that's against the law. So we'd take somebody's last name and somebody's first name and another address, another phone number, put it all together, call them up, say, here's the thing, my father's moving to Portland, Oregon, and it's an emergency, he's really sick, we need to get an email address set up for him so we can stay in touch with him, we're his daughters, so here's his name and address, phone number, and give us just the email, here's his email thing we want, and give me the password, and then tell us it's set up, and we'll send you the check. And they would, and then we'd call Yachty, here it is, and they'd go on ARS, which we didn't know until I found out, and then I quit Scientology soon after that. But when I didn't know, they'd go on ARS and spam the thing, because their view was if you could get it down the first page, no one would read it. And I don't think they're wrong on that. Most people don't read a whole first page onto the second page of a news group.
Tory,
do you see what I mean? Yeah.
Let me say something about this. What they were doing, this was probably the early days, this was probably their first effort, Church of Scientology, Office of Special Affairs. This is their first effort at what is really their time-honored, perhaps their most successful tactic for dealing with critics. Critics in the 90s got on message boards and began to communicate, share secret documents. So the Church of Scientology, their strategy would be, and still is today, is to go into those groups of critics and pose and have a phony name and say, I'm a critic. But really, it's the old time-honored divide and conquer, double agent. So wherever there's an electronic group of people who are opponents of Scientology, count on the Church of Scientology to be there with people who are basically
they'll pretend they're part of it. I watched Yachty do it, and he literally created 10 different identities. Because let's say, what is your name? Linda. Okay, let's say you're saying Scientology sucks, right? Yeah. So he wants to nail you, right? So he's like, well, I don't think that's true, right? And you don't answer. And so he's like, well, so he can't just keep saying, I don't think that's true, right? But he wants to keep the thread going off of you. Their thing was to distract, degrade the critics, slime the whole news group. So finally he creates another guy, Joe. And Joe says, well, I don't think you should be against Linda. I like Linda. And you say, yeah, stop bugging me. And so now he creates another person, Fred. And Fred's like, well, I know her. She's really a bitch, right? And it just keeps going on and on and on until finally it blows up, and now the real critics pop in going, wait a minute, just stop. We like Linda. Now it's all off Scientology, right? Nobody's talking about Scientology, are they? They're just talking about Linda. And that's their goal. Get it off Scientology, get it onto Linda. And now you get the real critics in. So he created 10 different identities, and he would just work them until, his thing was it's like a fishing. You just throw out the link, throw it out, until a real critic bites, and now they're all fighting with each other. Perfect. It's off Scientology. They got their product.
But then the other side of it was the actual spamming that was happening in the late 90s. They would take a post that somebody would make with the post title and their name. They would then repost that with your name and your title, but then they would put recipes in there instead.
Yeah, that was the first thing I saw. That was the first thing I saw.
The next wave would be Nazi propaganda with your name. And then they moved into pure gibberish. And this would be hundreds and thousands of posts that were being generated just to make the news group completely unreadable. And that went on for
it's still going on.
Time.
It's still going on.
What is that, URS?
Alt Religion Scientology. You can go to Google Groups and then type in alt period religion period Scientology, and it'll come up. Yes?
There's one thing I've been curious about, folks. I had a friend a few years ago kind of got somewhat involved in Scientology. Fortunately, he had a short enough attention span that he lost interest in it before it got to the point of no return. Actually, in essence, I'm kind of surprised he didn't, by tracking down based on what I've heard since. Maybe they just lost track of him. But the point is, what really lured him in the first place is he'd gone by, I guess, one of the centers there and taken their test. And I guess they told him they were really amazed by how well he did, and it was so impressive. And what I kind of suspected at the time, I didn't share my suspicions with him, was that this was kind of a flattering technique to lure them in. Is that true? Is that a tactic they use? Or?
It is a tactic. It's not. Their original thing was the personality test. Did any of you ever do that or see that in the old days? I mean, it was a 200-question thing. They originally had people that would talk to you, and it was very effective because through those 200 questions they could find out your buttons, right? What affects you? I'm bad at communication, or I'm bad at relationships, or I can't handle money, or I'm real awkward in a group, or whatever. And then they'd go, this is really a problem for you, right? It's ruining your life. That's what Hubbard said. You have to find their ruin, what's ruining their life. And truly, when you do hit that real button, it's kind of easy to get them to go, I think we could help you. It's not a guarantee, but I think so. But then what happened is so many people screwed up with that, and people weren't willing to do the 200 questions, so they switched it to this automatic computerized thing, right? So it went from a real honest person kind of talking to you and going, Stu, I think I like you. You know what I mean? I think you're good at this, you're good at that, you're a little low on this, but I think we could fix it. And you're kind of like, okay, I'm coming with you, let's go. You know what I mean? And it changed to literally they'd go like this, it'd print out and they'd say, Stuart, you're the ugliest person in the world, and you're horrible. Nobody likes you. You're really anti-personality. They just have on and on and on. They just have these horrible things. I mean, we would say, how could you say that to anyone? You know what I mean? It's like I can't imagine anyone going, oh, I want your help. After that, it's like, forget it. I mean, it was just pathetic. So that went on for a few years, and then they canned that, and now they have the free stress test. Which is because everyone is stressed out, so it's sort of like, well, yeah, I'm stressed out. So.
It would have been sometime in the 2002 or something like that. Like I said, it was just the opposite. It wasn't that they were criticizing.
I know, that's why I'm saying it was wrong. What they used to say, if everyone was right on the test, on the original test, they'd say, you know what, you're out of valence. Because valence is who you really are, out of valence is who you're not. So they'd kind of nail the person on you're faking it. Do you see what I mean? And they'd go, God, you got me. And they'd say, okay, come on in, we can help you. But so this is a whole new thing to say, oh my God, you're so great. I mean, it's like they're so off the wall on their original things that used to work. It's kind of funny to watch. It's like, what are you thinking of?
Kind of switching tactics.
Yeah, and that don't work. Yes, you in the purple.
Stacy and I went over the one on Sunset Boulevard one day.
Right.
Just
to spend some time. And we did take a test, and then you hand it in, and then you go watch a movie.
Right.
And they're trying to sell you books. Then they come and get you, and then they tell you what the results are, and they have a little printout, a graph.
Oh.
And I was abnormal.
Ah! How shocking! And in the Scientology world, that is a congratulations. Yes, you in the back.
Yeah, I had a friend I went to high school with, actually reconnected many years afterwards, and he was involved in Scientology, and he basically credits Scientology with saving his life and getting him off drugs, which it probably did.
Me too.
But then, essentially, it appears he's addicted to Scientology.
Right.
And I wrote a book. It's called The Male Thing Explained. It's an autobiographical.
What's it called?
The Male Thing Explained.
Oh, okay.
And it's an autobiographical thing that traces the development of identity, not only of men but women as well. Huh? And I gave him a copy, and he said, reading it at times, he burst into tears. And because it really keys into stuff from psychological, sociological, from all these different areas about what it is to be human. And then he pulled back on the emotions and started kind of criticizing it because it had too much psychology.
Right.
And the psychs are basically Hitler's Jews, the enemy of the state or whatever it is.
Right.
And he's made the psychs the blame for everything and the drugs and medications they hand out. And I said, psychology helps a lot of people. He says, how can it help? They go in for like 45 minutes, and then it's over. What kind of work can you do in 45 minutes? He said, with Scientology, we may audit for 20 or 30 hours at a time, and really get into it. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's called brainwashing. That's what our armed services do. We break down the psychology and all the defense mechanisms so we can implant whatever we want.
Right.
And, over the several years that I was friends, I pulled away from it a few years ago, but I realized, that I could not help him even if I wanted to, because his entire identity is basically Scientology.
Right.
And that if you take that away from people, it leaves them with nothing, and that's why, and plus all the fears and the defensiveness that is implanted as well.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of Scientologists do have nervous breakdowns and fall apart, because they're crippled to believe they can't make it in the outside world, and there's no resources to help them.
It's true. Academics who've studied cults have talked to me and interviewed me, and many of them have said, you're amazing. You've healed so fast. Really, I just kind of left and started talking, and that was it. And I said, but you got to remember one thing. I never left alone. I left on the internet, unbeknownst to me, that thousands and thousands of people would start writing to me. A lot of them against me at first. They all thought I was a secret agent. Which some of them still try to run, which is, I'm pretty sure, OSA trying to run it. Don't trust her, she's a secret agent. But yeah, it's like, come on. But that was part of it. And the other part was that Bob Minton gave me a laptop, and he just said, start writing your story. And I did start writing it, and every time I'd hit send, I could feel it was that much less charge. You know what I mean? It was like all these things that were just knotted up, and I couldn't talk about them. The first one was about epilepsy, and this was a great story, because epilepsy, they would never talk out in public about it. They would wait till they were behind closed doors and say, okay, did you fix it? Have you fixed epilepsy yet? And I'd say, no, not yet. I'm still working on it, that kind of thing, right? And all kinds of degrading comments, and you're a degraded being, and you're irresponsible, and blah, blah, blah. They run that on everybody because we were all at the top and it wasn't working. So everybody had to go through, we're out ethics, we're irresponsible, this and that, right? So, now I forgot what I was going to say. What was I saying? You're the tree about epilepsy.
Now
Boom.
I forgot what I was supposed to remember that you were going to say.
It was a red hat. That's what it was.
No, come on. It was about epilepsy. And I was telling you. Oh, okay, so I finally decided to tell my story. And so I sat down and I wrote my story because I looked at it as all these people were against me. And I thought, you know what? It's like a giant puzzle with all these big holes. And they don't know me. All they know is that, I was somebody who came on the net for 4 weeks. I made 4,000 posts in 4 weeks. I woke up and I left. And they were like, nobody wakes up that fast, right? Which it was pretty fast, but Andreas knew I'd been waking up for 10 years. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, he didn't know it, but he learned it later. But it's like, literally, I'd been connecting my own dots for a long time. But I did wake up really fast, and then I left. So I started telling my first story. I said, Magoo's worst nightmare. And I told the whole story about epilepsy. And I hit send. And I mean, it was very personal to me at the time. I hadn't spoken to many people about it. Had been made wrong forever about it for 30 years. And I hit send. And OSA came on right away, and they said, Magoo, that's my nickname on the internet. And they said, do you honestly think, with a body like yours, if we had a ship and we could take 21 people, and I was in Stacey Brooks' guest room at the time in Clearwater, Florida, and it was my first post, and they said, do you honestly think with a ship we would take someone like you with your body? And I sat back in the bed, I went, yes! Because I knew these critics, even though they were originally against me, I knew they could think. Do you know what I mean? And they could see what was said. And they did. They nailed her at. They just pounded the person who wrote that. It was just like post after post after post about how gross it is to say that to someone, to treat someone like that. And that was kind of the beginning of my whole relationship with the critics. And now Anonymous, it's been kind of the same thing, where my only fear with Anonymous is that I do feel like they're working very hard to infiltrate Anonymous. I opened up the Anonymous accounts. Do you know what I mean? So my fear is that they will try to trick you. I told them when I met Anonymous, I said, the first thing I can tell you is they are going to become part of you, and then they're going to start running programs against me, Mark, whoever, any critic, any ex-Scientologist. So the easy way on it is to just look at the product. Like if it's Tory's a liar, what's the product of that? If you just kept saying it, I'm going to eventually leave. Who wins there? You or OSA? It's an easy way to figure it out. Because it's one way or the other. One wins or the other. Does that make sense? Yes? Yeah. Yes?
What's the difference? You've mentioned Sea Org a couple times. What's the difference between Sea Org and just the average member of Scientology?
Oh, good question. The Sea Org are the top 10% of the planet. No, Hubbard says they're the top 10% of the planet, or auditors are. But their Sea Org are there. It's sort of like, in, I guess, Catholic churches or something where they have the monasteries and they have the people that join that. That's kind of how the Sea Org is. It's Hubbard's army. It's his personal army that when you join it, you work 24 hours a day, or you're part of it, you live there, you eat there, that's your thing. You sign the billion-year contract. So the public, there's those guys that are Sea Org. They're always in uniforms, or almost always. Then there's the staff, which are just guys that work there either day or night. And they're usually Monday to Friday is one group, and the other one are nights and weekends. And they work on a 2.5-year contract or a 5-year contract. And in public are just the public guys that are paying to move up the bridge to total freedom and get fleeced. There you go. Yes.
Freedom from their money.
Yeah, freedom from their money. Exactly. Yes.
When I was at the Sunset compound, I was flirting with the possibility of taking some Dianetics courses. One of the things I really wanted to get cleared up when I was there was the difference between Scientology and Dianetics. And the member who I was speaking to assured me that there was a strict delineation between the two, and that I could participate in one, but was in no means required to believe or have anything to do with, let's say, Scientology as a religion. And is there a truth to that? And then
No.
also have
Scientology is like a mind control train. You get on it, you think, I'm going to go to the next stop, I'll get off. The difference is you don't know behind that curtain, there's literally thousands of people that their statistics for the week are counted on you moving on to the next course. It's not just like you and your supervisor and like, you know what, I'm done. I had a good time, I'm getting off the train. They're like, no way, man. There's like another 500 cars. You're just on the first car. You haven't even gone clear. You got to go OT. You got all this stuff that we found out about you that you want to get fixed. It's not fixed, right? And you're like, yeah. They're like, okay, the next car will fix it. It will. There's a really good chance it will.
The Scientologists that I've worked with on sets, and we talk about networking, I've worked on a series of like 4 or 5 films, and the producers and the actors and the directors were all Scientologists.
Right.
I thought, wow, this is a great way to network, and they all have their shit together, and I figured this would be like going to the learning annex.
Hardly. Here's the difference. As you go... as you go up the bridge on this mind-controlled train, this is something I thought of, but it's true. You go car to car, right? You're still on the train. You want to get off, but you got all these people surrounding you and like, no, we need you on it, man, and we're going to surround you. You're going to make movies with us. This is it. You're our guy, right? And you're like, okay, I'm their guy. And, next car, right? And you keep moving, and you're thinking, okay, I am going to get off in a little bit, but I'm just going to do this next movie. And then, you're more roped in. Now you're paying money to them. Pretty soon, the windows that literally you used to be able to see out and see the trees and the world, they're changed to these Dianetic Scientology ads, right? And so it's kind of like you just see L. Ron Hubbard and all this stuff, and it's like pretty soon that's it. You're just in this little teeny world. You may be working with these Scientologists, but they're very insulated. Try to ask them about Xenu one time. I'll tell you what they're going to say, because John Sweeney from the BBC interviewed me about it. He'd interviewed all the celebrities, and he knew I was in and out. And he said, first of all, to pick me up, John Sweeney, they had private investigators following him. We had to zoom around into Griffith Park, pull into a thing, and do the interview. He said, Tory, what's wrong with these people? They've had private investigators for us for a week. I'm the BBC. You know what I mean? We have cameras on them. He had no idea they were setting him up with a video that was already made against him, right? That they got out to 100,000 media people thinking it was going to hurt him. It didn't. We met him in London, and he's doing great. But it really showed what obnoxious people they were. And journalists have called me and said, you know what? I was in Hollywood in the 80s, and I never spoke out. But now that I've seen what they've done with John Sweeney, I am going to start doing something. It really had the opposite effect to them.
And the other question I had was you talk about indoctrinating children. And so, do you know anything about this supposed elementary academy that's being underwritten by Will Smith or?
I've heard they're going to use the study tech, which is Hubbard's tech. I don't know much more about it than that. My guess is that, like when Tom Cruise got in, we were all ordered not to ever say anything about it. Yes, Tom Cruise is in. You can't talk about it. And then I was at Flag in Clearwater when they handled Tom Cruise, and they had a big event, and he came out and he said, I'm a Scientologist. If I can get trained, you can get trained. Everybody, they sent everybody to the register to buy their training. But, I don't know about Will, whether his publicist says he isn't. Per his actions, it looks like he's pretty well connected. I don't know. I hope for him and his family, I hope he isn't.
The question isn't so much about Will, but about the school.
Is it a Scientology school?
I read in the news about...
They're using the study tech. They're using the Hubbard study tech. That I know. Whether it's all a Scientology school, I don't think so yet.
And many of the teachers are Scientologists as well.
Yeah.
And for the
benefit of the skeptics in the room, study tech, maybe there's three main principles, and you can first hear them, and then you'll see how they apply to mind control. First, it sounds like study tech, because one of them is a gradient, which means you just learn gradually. Another is miss words, which means look up words that you don't know or else you'll go unconscious. And then the third is mass, which is that you should study the object and see a picture of things instead of just using words to study it. But those same techniques can be used in mind control, because the gradient is how you slowly condition someone's mind. And misunderstood words is how you hypnotize someone. So if you read Hubbard's work, every 10th word is a neologism. And it does send you out of your flow, because you're trying to follow and there's a new word you don't know. It breaks your flow of thought. And as a hypnotist, as a master stage hypnotist, Hubbard uses the black version of study tech to suck you into diet.
Wow, I never knew that. That's very interesting. Because I'll tell you this, that I never saw it that way, and they seem very simple. It's like a gradient, look up your words. But what happens actually in Scientology schools and in Scientology course rooms is you can't just look up a word. You have to look up, let's say you have to read the paragraph. First of all, if it's a certain kind of word clearing that you have to do, you have to read out loud. And if you ever stumble once, you have a misunderstood word. No question. You have to find it, then you have to clear the word. Now you have to look it up in the dictionary. You have to not only be able to read the whole definitions without stumbling, or then you've got a misunderstood word in that. So they used to call it word chains, because you end up with these long chains of looking up words. And the root word. You have to know all of that, and then go back and reread the thing. If you stumble again, you got another word. So it ends up being a lot more than just looking up a word. And the other thing that's really dangerous about Scientology schools with children is they run off check sheets. Now, I happen to be a kid who wasn't doing real great in school, so I kind of like check sheets because you can go at your own rate. If you're slow, you can do whatever you want. And I would kind of space out and stuff like that, so check sheets I thought was a great idea. But check sheet. A check sheet is a thing where they have each step of what you're going to study, and then you check it off. It's a check sheet.
Almost like an army manual.
Right. But the difference is in schools, generally, most children are learning how to talk, how to debate, how to discuss, what's your view, what's my view, sharing things. There's none of that in a Scientology school because you're just working on your check sheet. Now, there's an advantage to it, but there's also a big disadvantage. Yes?
This friend of mine, his daughter, who's a single parent, was going to a Scientology school, and when she was about 12 years old, he suddenly realized that his daughter was like at the second grade level in math. She wasn't learning anything really, and so and she was resisting going to the school anyway. So that's when he pulled her out of school and started sending her to.
They're terrible in math and science.
Yeah. Besides the fact he couldn't afford to keep her in the school.
Right. Yeah, it's very expensive, and public school, for the most part, is way better.
And they're not accredited. So if you're in a Scientology high school and you're planning to go to college, they don't accept your grades.
I don't think that's true because my son did, and we went to college. So maybe certain schools, but they were fine in the California schools. Yes. But the problem he had was with math. I barely got him in college because he had such crummy math, and they were really big on math at the time. Yes.
Yeah, I'm with the center here, and when we were at another location years ago, a writer named Harlan Ellison said that he was at a dinner where Scientology was born. He overheard Ron Hubbard saying with some other writers, I think they said, well, you should start your own religion. He said, that's a good idea. And when that story was told to Scientologists, they said, they would never listen to it.
Right.
Another thing I wanted to, that was just a comment, but the thing I wanted to ask was, many years ago, I saw a talk show with also an ugly person who looked like L. Ron Hubbard, who said he was his son.
L. Ron Hubbard Jr.
Yeah, and he was going after Scientology, as I recall, and he was trying to sue them. I hope he was successful, or what happened to him?
That's a very good point to bring up, and I have a great story on this that a lot of people don't know. I was working for RPR, which even most Scientologists don't know what that is, but it's actually Ron's Public Relations Office. It's an entire unit set up just for Ron's PR in the media. Right? They have to make sure every week that any PR flaps are handled and his name is better, or they don't get to get their libs, their day off. So it's a big deal, right? So anyway, we were there setting up interviews for media, and I'm good at that. I was great at it. I was making $1,000 a week in the 80s, only working part-time from 8 till 1. Plus, I was getting all these accolades from the head guys and everything because I was opening up so many. It was kind of ironic because some of the biggest things I opened up was just because I have a bad memory. And I would call the guy and he'd say, no. And I'd say, okay. And I'd go down the list. And I'd call him again. He'd say, you just called me an hour ago. And I'd say, okay, sorry. And I called him the third time. This guy was one of the biggest radio stations they ever got. He said, you know what, Tory, you've called me twice in one afternoon. What is wrong with you? I said, maybe it's karma, pal. You need to do an interview. He said, all right, damn it, I will. So I got the interview. But the point is, I'm working there. We're like cruising along, setting up these interviews. Everything's going great. And all of a sudden, overnight, everyone's like, no, we want to interview L. Ron Hubbard Jr. and Ben Corden. I'm like, what? Oh, yeah, there's a book out, L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman. So I go to the execs and I'm like, what are you talking about? L. Ron Hubbard Jr. is speaking out about his dad? To me that was just like, how could that be, right? And I said, don't worry, Tory, we'll have it handled in 24 hours. And this was one of the first things that happened that really, besides them getting off my medicine, which was a huge crack in my Truman Show in 72. This was in 85. You come in the next day, and they've got a notarized piece of paper from L. Ron Hubbard Jr., and it says, I have no problems with my father. I never read that. I never wrote that book. We're happily getting along. Notarized, L. Ron Hubbard Jr. And I'm like, I said, what is that? And I said, see, Tory, they're just liars. We've told you this. These critics of Scientology are flat out liars. That's it. Now roll forward 2000, I escape out. 2001, I have a party at my house, and Bent Corridon comes, the co-author, and the author. And I say, what happened to L. Ron Hubbard Jr.? I mean, what was that? I was probably one of the few people that knew that whole thing. In 24 hours, they get this notarized thing, right? Because they paid him off. They paid him millions. That was it. I said, you're kidding. Those are the kind of things you don't know in Scientology. They'll never tell you. They wouldn't even tell me, and I was directly on the lines. Would they tell me? Hell no.
Is the book out there anywhere?
Yeah, it's called L. Ron Hubbard. You can go to xenu.net and download it right there, xenu.net, and read it. Or I think you can go to amazon.com. I believe it's still for sale. L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman. Another good one is, what's the other one? Barefaced Messiah and A Piece of Blue Sky. All three of those are really good books. Yes?
Tory, do you have any idea, or at least when you were in, about how many in America considered themselves Scientologists? And also, what is the breakdown between the numbers of men and women? Were there more men, more women? Is it equal?
And do they inflate the figures?
Yes, that's a great question, and they absolutely inflate they say they have 8 million members. Now, even when I was in, which was up until July of 2000, active, I would say, I don't know, maybe 250,000. If that. You know what I mean? I used to call. At one point, they let me on. You know how I have all my, at one point, this was another one of those. I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I said, why don't we just call these book owners that have bought Dianetics and bought your books and they're not on course? Why don't we just give them a little jingle? You know what I mean? And invite them in. And they said, that's a good idea. So I started calling on the phone. Get me off that mailing list. That person doesn't live here. They died 5 years ago. We've been writing saying, take us off the mailing. I mean, it was frightening to me. It was like so many people were not really Scientologists. You know what I mean? They still send me mail, and I'm a declared suppressive person expelled from the Church of Scientology, and I still get mail from them. I do. How are you doing? How's everything going? Now, one other thing, as far as they're stopping free speech, this was the thing. Did I give you? Wait, hang on.
Were there equal numbers of men and women, or do you know offhand when you were in?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, qualified men, there's way more qualified women. Because here's the deal. All the women, I'm teasing, but all the women are after money. That's all they want, so they can pay for their bridges. So they did have some wealthy guys at one point, and I was married, so I didn't have anything in it, except my girlfriends were all single. And so I asked this wealthy guy once, who I knew pretty well, I said, why don't you ever date the Scientologists? And he said, I'll tell you why. You want to know why? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, because the first thing they ask you is, what kind of car do you drive? What business do you have? How much money do you have? It's like, that's it. And he said, so all of them, all these rich guys, went out and got WOGs, which is what Scientology calls non-Scientologists, got them into the church, hooked them up in the mind control, and paid for their bridges. But this I meant to give. This is from London. I'm going to give this to you, Stu, because Stu gave me a camera before we went to London recently. Here you go, and that's to give to Anonymous. And this is an interesting story. We were at St. Hill, which is where Hubbard originally had his house. And this London Anonymous guys made this card, which is really, really funny. In fact, I think I was going to give it to Anonymous, but I might leave it here because it's kind of cool if you want. Or do you want it? Do you think Anonymous? What do you think? Do you want it here? It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be cool. But I put it on the internet, on YouTube. I read it to Anonymous so they could read it. Because what happened was we went to St. Hill. And we tried to give it to St. Hill. It's a letter to Scientology that they made. And they all signed. And it's like, dearest cult, crossed out. Church of Scientology, crossed out. Corporate London Incorporated. Anyway, it's very funny. They're very witty. Hi, London, to anybody there. I love these guys. They're really great. But anyway, they were going to mail it to them. we went to St. Hill. We tried to give it to the security guard, and he said, "We don't want your card." And there was a young man with me, and I said, "Wait a second. This is a young man. His father is here in the Sea Org, and he just wants to give this to him. Can't you just give him this card?" And you know what he said? "No, we don't want it." Well, here's the good news on that. That young man's sister is out of the Sea Org because of me and he going to St. Hill. Isn't that good? And his mother called me and she said, "It's because of you, Tory, because my son's been speaking out. But they have so much upset with you, I think they kicked her out." And so I thought, hey, I'm going to announce it. If you have kids that are in the Sea Org in L.A., you give me a call. My number's on the internet, and I will go personally with you if you want. And we'll get your kids out. Yeah. That's one of my big goals. So this is for the Center for Inquiry. Well, you guys can read it if you want to come up here, but it's pretty cool. Yes?
What about your son?
I never bring up my son. I never have. He's doing great, but I didn't want him as part of this mess because, remember, I know 7 kids who've killed themselves. So when I first left, I was terrified for him. Thankfully, he's fine, but I'm not going to say any more about it. I don't want him to be part of it. His life is good. I have a good relationship with him. He is a fantastic kid. And no, he's not a Scientologist. Yes?
You mentioned you're in Toastmasters. Has it helped you find that sense of belonging that maybe you had before in the group?
I'm not in Toastmasters now, but I'm probably going to rejoin. I actually joined at Celebrity Center. They had a little Toastmasters thing.
There's one here too.
I know, but I'm going to join yours. I'm not going to join theirs. I don't think they'd let me in at Celebrity Center anymore. Anyone else? Yes.
Everyone's paying in. Who's making the money in Scientology? Where does the...
Good question. Hubbard used to... now these are a couple... I'll tell you a story about that. Hubbard, when he was in the church, he created the church. In the 70s, it turned out, he said, "I'm done. I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore." He got a ranch up north. And he said, "I want $1 million a week." Now, Miscavage was working for him at the time, who now is the head of Scientology. Miscavage and some guys would take $1 million, put it in a suitcase, they'd go to Vegas, goof around, then they'd go to Hubbard's ranch, he'd open it up, put it next to his bed. Next week, same thing, This went on and on. Hubbard had so much money in his house. And this, Mark Headley's wife just told me this. He had so much money in his house, they started putting it in the barn. Oh. And he had so much cash in the house in the barn, they said, create those vaults, those top secret vaults. That's what the vaults were for, was the cash, to put the money in there. Right? So now, Hubbard's dying. And he's giving the church over to Pat and Annie Broker. And I was at the announcement that L. Ron Hubbard died, which was at the Palladium, and all the Scientologists went. And they announced L. Ron Hubbard had to move on to higher things because he couldn't do his next auditing with a body, And I'm like, oh, please. But they said Pat and Annie Broker are going to take over the church. And I'd never even heard of them. I'd been in for years. I was like, who are Pat and Annie Broker? But immediately, Miscavage takes over. And so it was kind of like this, don't ask, don't tell. Miscavige started the finance police. It got really Nazi Germany-like. It was very weird, and everybody was like, don't ask, don't tell. So now I move forward. I leave. I meet Jesse Prince, who used to be at the top of Scientology and is out. And I said, "Jesse, what happened? What happened to Pat and Annie Broker?" And he said, "You want to know what happened? Miscavige got with Pat Broker and said, either you get the hell out of here so I can take over the church, or I'm going to put you in prison for the rest of your life for transporting money across state lines and never paying taxes." And that's what happened to Pat Broker. And Annie Broker is still, I think, in the RPF, which is their slave camp in Gold. DM, your day is coming.
Didn't Hubbard get in some trouble with the IRS at one point?
Oh, definitely. That's why he was on the ship. That's why he lived out on a ship because of that, so they couldn't get him. He realized he was...
Yeah, I have a question regarding the ship issue, because since there's international law, and Hubbard avoided U.S. law by going on a ship, how many ships does the Scientology church own, and is it enough to keep them off of all country shores for however long that they...
No, they only own one ship. It's the Free Winds, and it's filled with asbestos.
Well, yes, that I know.
Yeah, that's it. Hubbard had different ships that he bought, but it was basically only one. The Apollo ship was his main ship.
You know how many people could fit on that ship?
It wasn't big. I was on the Boulevard, which was out in the LA harbor, and it was just some old hanker ship. It wasn't some big fancy ship. Even the Freewinds, which I thought was huge. I'd never been on a cruise line. That's their big cruise line ship that they basically float around, and they do their OT8 on the Freewinds, which is their top level. And I went there for a week, and I thought it was big. And I was talking to the cabbies out, the cab drivers and stuff. They're from Jamaica, and they're all talking, and I really dug them, right? So I'm talking, and they said, "Oh man, this is nothing, man. Wait till you see the big ship." And all of a sudden, let's say if this is the Freewinds, this ship comes in like this. It was just like, it was a little ant compared to this other ship. It was amazing. And what did Scientology do? I went and said, "I love these cab drivers. They're really nice." They said, "We'll have an event, and we'll invite them on the ship. They can bring their wives, free drinks, free food." They had entertainment. They locked off all the top secret stuff, so it looked just like a cruise ship, which is how they promote it all around the world. It's just a cruise ship. It's not a cruise ship. They just do their PR stuff to kind of make people think so. There you go. And they made me an honorary PR for that. Yes.
Was that ship parked somewhere in the
recently?
Mediterranean? I mean, for him.
Oh, you mean Hubbard's?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, actually, that's a good question, though, because when I left, I met Laurel Sullivan, who was L. Ron Hubbard's personal PR. And I was pretty successful with PR in the church in a number of different things. And I said that to her. I said, I don't get it, because I was pretty good at the stuff I did. And she goes, "Yeah, but let's make one thing clear. You were never trained in L. Ron Hubbard's PR tech, were you?" And I said, "No." And she said, "That's why you were successful." She said, "We who were trained in it were kicked out of every single port in the world using L. Ron Hubbard's PR tech." There you go. That's the what are your crimes, what are your overs. That's Hubbard's tech. I used to say that's so stupid. It's like you're creating your own enemies again. Yes?
Did I misunderstand? Did you say that somebody was in a slave camp?
Yes. Somebody is in a slave camp. The top executives of Scientology are locked out in Hemet in what they call the SP Hall. It's like a hall like this. They've been in it since 2000. Now, I met one of my friends' wife was in that hall. And I said, "I don't get it. I mean, how could the top executives, I know these guys." And she said, first of all, they farm them out to every event. So the Scientologists don't know they're locked up. Neither do the staff, right? They're in there on these top secret programs, right? And secondly, you never know who's in there as a plant to rat on you. So nobody really wants to gang up against David Miscavage because they might get beaten up by him. And he does beat up people now. Now, David Miscavage, I met somebody who was beaten up. And I said, "I don't get it." The guy was like 6'2". I said, "Miscavige is a shrimp. How could he beat you up?" He said, "Tory, remember this. Number one, the mind control. And number two, he always comes with big bullies. So if you did ever heat him, they'd cream you."
Explain the RPF.
Well, wait, she's not done. Yeah, so
It takes great courage then. I mean, I remember seeing you 2 years ago, and I thought about it ever since. And you don't have to go through that to stop going to synagogue on Saturdays. You don't have to go through that to stop going to Catholic church. You might get stabbed from your family.
Right.
This is something different.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's not a religion. It's a cult. Do you all agree? I mean, from what you've heard today, it is. Yeah, and they're trying to really get in with the religion. So that's their big thing, because then they know they'll have protection. And they used to do that when I was in. They'd say, "Look, you better watch out, because if these anonymous guys or critics come after you, if you let them come after us, they could come after you." But see, the truth is, religions go, "Wait, we don't do the shit you do." That's what's been happening so far. Yes?
It sure seems like for a religion that they try to sell, that there's an awful lot of paperwork involved.
Oh, yeah.
How much actual paperwork would not only a member or somebody who's trying to move up the bridge, how much paperwork is involved weekly and why?
Okay, every session that you have, they write it down. Now, you don't know they're actually going to be using it against you, but they are if you leave. So they're writing it down, they say, so that they can fix it, or if ever anything's wrong, they can correct it. My folders go from the floor to the top of that thing. That's how much. Then these are individual folders, session folders. I have like tons of folders because I did a lot of co-auditing in the beginning where it'd be like you audit me, I audit you. And so when you do that, you're not paying for it, so you can do a ton of it. And I did it on some other levels too. So that created more folders, but I have a ton. There's a lot of paperwork in it, and that's just your auditing. Then you've got your ethics folders too. One time they opened a door in ethics because you go in ethics and it just seems like it's ethics, right? And you go, well, here's my KR, right? And one day he goes, go put it in the side room. I open this door, it's just a full room full of all these knowledge reports, not even filed or anything, just a rack. They're so behind now because they don't have that many people anymore, and they don't have that many staff. So it must be a disaster. Yes?
In some, I know it's officially called the Church of Scientology, but in some areas it's called Dianetics. Why is that? Do you know?
Well, Hubbard originally started with like missions, which would be something like a Dianetic mission, and then orgs, like the LA org and Pasadena org and stuff like that, and then St. Hills, which is St. Hill, England, and American St. Hill here, and then their advanced organizations, which is, they have the AOLA, they have them around, I think Australia has one, England has one, and then they have the free ones, which is the OT8, and FLAG, which is in Clearwater. So, what was your question?
Dianetic centers.
Okay, so the Dianetic centers are just like the beginning places. Now, this is an interesting thing about Dianetic centers because they used to have tons of missions, and that's why they were successful, because the mission holders were like little houses. It was like, come on over, have some coffee, we'll teach you about Dianetics, right? And so people felt comfortable. It was like this. They're sitting around talking, they go every Thursday night, that kind of thing, right? But when Miscavage took over, he wiped out all of the missions. All of them.
They were like a McDonald's franchise.
All right, they were their own business. And then when Miscavage took over, he said, no, you're underneath RTC, like everything, every book you sell, we're going to tell you how many books you have to sell, when you have to sell them, what your targets are. If you don't make them, you have to do X, Y, and Z. You have to send us so much money. It totally changed. So it basically wiped out the mission network, so there's no more cozy, come on in. You got to go into Scientology, and a lot of people don't want to. Does that explain it? And one other thing is you can just buy a Dianetics book and do it with a friend. You can. I used to teach Book One seminars where we just taught people how to do it by yourself. If you ever wanted to try it anyway. Yeah?
When they were chasing you in Florida, what were they going to do when they got you?
I think they knew I knew a lot of stuff. And so they were trying originally at LAX to say, don't go. I mean, the vice president came up to me and said, we know where you're going and you're not going there. And my friend, Stacy, had said, bring a cell phone. Now, this is in 2000. I had one of those emergency cell phones. This was before everybody had a cell phone. And I had my little emergency cell phone. And I said, oh, Stacy, they don't do things like that. Like, you're delusional. Do you know what I mean? And she said, Tory, we used to run these programs. Bring a cell phone. So I'm waiting at my house. I had called a van to pick me up. This was all overnight. We made this plan. And the van doesn't show up. And so I finally call them and I say, what's up? And they said, oh, someone called, an anonymous person called and canceled your van. That was if you think of like a solid black wall with a little pinhole in it, that was my first instinct that maybe they really do fair game. You see what I mean? It was just like a little pinhole. Now, I finally get a van. I tried to call vans. Everybody was booked on a Wednesday, right? They're all booked. I finally get somebody, because I can't call my friends. I'm leaving Scientology, right? So I get somebody. I get out to the airport. The plane's been canceled. Now I'm sitting there like, can they cancel a plane? I don't know on that to this day. So now I walk in, and the vice president walks up to me, who I'd been working with directly, and she says, Tory, we know where you're going. You're not going there. You're not going to see those people. And I get out my cell phone. I said, Stacy, she's here. And she said, okay, stay on the line. I'm going to put Jesse on the line. Jesse got on, said, we're going to walk you through this and get you on the plane. She glued onto me. She's carrying my luggage around. I'm getting on one of those vans to go to the next terminal, because I had to go to the next terminal. They're getting another ticket for me because that plane was canceled. And I say to the guy, look, I'm really sorry I'm escaping out of this cult, and this chick is the vice president. She won't leave me alone. I'm trying to blow her off, right? And she won't go. So I didn't realize she was copying down all the information. So Bob Minton got ticked, and he said, you know what, we'll just get you a first-class ticket. You can go into this special lounge. They can't come in. So, every airport has a special lounge for first-class tickets. So I get in the lounge. I get rid of her. I think, whew, I'm done. Now I get to Chicago. My husband comes walking up. Tory, what are you doing? What's going on, honey? We need to go on a vacation. Now, the thing you have to know about my husband is I knew a lot of the dark secrets of Scientology. He was really terrified of the critics and he wasn't in on the stuff I was in on. I'd been on a lot of stuff he didn't know about. He didn't know about the top secret mafia. He didn't know a lot of stuff, right? So he was born in Scientology, so he had nothing to compare it to. He knew it too. They lock up people if they feel like they flipped out. They will literally lock you up in a room or a cabin like Lisa McPherson because they think you're type 3, which is you're nuts. And I used to tell them, because I had seizures, I said, Harold, if they ever lock me up, you have to promise me you'll come get me, because I promise you it will kill me. I will be dead. Okay, so I already had that in my mind. So when he walks up and goes, we need to go on a vacation, I put the whole thing together, and I'm like, no fucking way. I'm not. And I said, get away from me. And he said, no, I need to talk to you. And I said, no. So then OSA shows up, this big army of people, the Office of Special Affairs. And I said, I thought you were just in the airport. And he said, well, they need to talk to you too. And they give me a big stack of papers about Bob, Stacy, Jesse, Mark, all these horrible people that you're going to see. And so I said, look, here's the deal. I am getting on that plane and you're not. Because I felt like I was sort of making a bridge out of a cult. I felt like if I went with him, he would say it's me or them, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make that decision. So I said, no, I have to go by myself. I have to go. I have to get on the plane by myself. I have to find out what these people know, and then I'll come back. Because my thing was, I thought I could come back and get him out.